record and start the conversation.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Charles. Charles, once again for joining me. Like I said a bit earlier, that my series just likes to get the interview series, Uncontaminated Sounds, likes to kind of investigate, the craft, different types of artistic crafts. So I've talked to, comedians, musicians, actors, different types of personalities, but particularly you're of particular interest. Your breadth of work from your past history and recent, it's fascinating. So it's great to have you on my series so far. So
Thank you.
So I don't know, like, where to begin. I guess in current times, and how have you been affected by, COVID and this social distancing, and let's, I guess, start there.
Well, I've worked from home for the last 10 years down in the basement here.
Oh, cool.
The Grunge mine, as I call it. And these days, I'm not doing a lot of active shooting for clients. It's primarily print sales, licensing, and fine art. I'd still photograph every day, but I've been working on more fine art projects.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I've been somewhat socially isolated for a number of years. But the difference is my wife has been working from home for 3 weeks now. The kids have been home for 3 weeks, and so she has the real job, working for Microsoft.
Oh yeah.
And so it's been hard to get into a groove of maintaining my working schedule when you're dealing with kids and all that.
Yeah. So everybody's healthy and safe there.
Everyone's good. Yeah, we're all good.
Cool.
Washington and Seattle started earlier than a lot of the rest of the nation. And I think because of the big tech companies recognizing very early on that their employees could work remotely, has made a difference. I saw the New York Times the other day had a piece on average miles traveled around the U.S. and Seattle has gone from an average of 3.8 miles to 61 feet. So,
whoa, yeah,
doing our part.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been just kind of staying in my little zone area too, but it's like I miss kind of the live shows too. Like I miss congregating, and I think I've read in a few articles that you've mentioned, you really love to capture that live experience.
Yeah.
And
well, I think I don't actually go to that many gigs.
Yeah.
And, at 56, it's a little late. I'm younger children, so
yeah.
But the thing I miss most is I'm working on my black belt, towards my black belt in karate.
Oh, cool.
And,
yeah.
So we're having to take lessons online now, but I miss the sparring aspect of it. So
what type is it?
Getting beat up by high schoolers.
What type of is it? Just karate, straight up karate, or
it's Kenpo karate, which
yes.
is the American style, Americanized style. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what? So I guess let's. I had a bunch of questions regarding, like, in your perspective now, where the Seattle is kind of like gentrification, I guess, or not gentrification, but I guess like the move in, of the tech companies in the last like 20 years or so. Has that kind of like diminished any scenes or movements? I obviously you might not be, right now, like you said, you might be out of like the current movements, but have you noticed any, cultural changes, I guess?
I think it's pretty much the same as everywhere else. I mean it's just not as I think in a large part, I think if you're maybe in your 20s, I can't really speak to that per se, what that experience is like now. But for the most part, it's not as special as it used to be. You know, you don't have to seek things out. It's not, um, it's just different. You know what I mean? I think post internet, it's just music has become different. Everything is so quickly accessible that to me it's lost some of that mystery.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know, is around music. It's not, and I'm not saying that there's not great new music being made.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a Qobuz subscriber, so you
Hmm.
know every week I'm able to check out what new releases are coming out for the most part, and Bandcamp as well, and there's great new music, but so much of it still just references the past. I don't, you know, I mean, I just don't know if we're ever going to have like the next Nirvana or
Yeah,
even the next Clash or whatever. It it's so it's not like centralized within, you know, separate scenes anymore
yeah.
per se.
Well, that's an observation I've made. You know, I was born in '85, so you were capturing like
Mhm.
the foundational music that I think my first album I received a CD was Nevermind, which was cool in like '96, paired with like the Beastie Boys, Licensed to Ill. So it was like, you had like that. You had the movement, the grunge movement, and then it was the foundation for the '90s stuff and the late '90s and hip hop. And then it was like, maybe early 2000s, and then it kind of got to the digital age where there was no real movement in
Yeah.
there. But yeah, it was fascinating. Like, I've never traveled out there out west. I'm from Boston and kind of moved to New York, and I've noticed you know is shooting in the last few years. All the historic venues have kind of shut down. The cooler stuff, with
Hmm.
the kind of grungy stuff. The grimy city venues where with the history have kind of shut down, and there's a lot of corporate stuff. Corporate bars, and you see a lot of people.
Yeah, like Seattle's become very much a foodie drink kind of town now instead of, you know, so people go out and spend their money on expensive food and drinks, I think, more than they do necessarily seeing bands.
Hmm,
Um, how much, I mean, the existing clubs and restaurant, I mean, who knows what's going to happen after this is all over and done. I know a lot of them are real struggling and concerned.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the some that have been there for, you know, that have survived from the grunge days are now like, geez, if we don't get help, we're going under.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's same here. Well, I guess everywhere too, right? It's
Yeah.
they're based off of the physical experience and people coming in and buying tickets to the shows and booze and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, without it, it's like you don't have a business model per se. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah, frustrating.
so what do you s- let me so how do you find speaking of digital and analog, I guess we'll go to the camera. Um, when you were shooting, the grunge era, scene, what tools were you using? What camera were you using?
I was using primarily a Nikon of, you know, various types.
Mm,
And I could pretty much stuck with one lens, which is a 24 millimeter,
yeah,
not wide, but not super wide. And I think that uh, it allowed me to be close, but at the same time have a little bit more intimacy than, let's say, I was using a 20 or a 18 or a fisheye or something.
yeah.
Um, and I would use an off-camera flash.
Mm,
So I primarily a Vivitar 285, which has a coil that you could attach to the hot shoe and the sensor, so it would still be where the camera is, but then you could hold the flash, you know, wherever you wanted to, and then
yeah,
the
yeah.
camera in the other hand. Um, and that gave my images, I think, that more natural light. I would diffuse the flash, and often I'd have a small external battery pack duct tape to it.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah,
So it gave it a nice, sometimes side light or whatever, and then I would leave the shutter open to whatever ambient light there is to give it the swirly light effect. So the
Yeah.
flash would freeze the subject, and then the lights would blur. And it was not a technique that I invented or anything, but
Hmm.
I tried to push it to its limit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find what are you shooting with now? I've seen it on your site more of a Leica or
Yeah, my main squeeze is a Leica M10
cool.
these days.
Yeah, yeah. Is
Heavy
that
blend.
digital? Is that's
Yeah,
digital?
it's
Yeah.
digital. I haven't shot a roll of film in probably 10 years. So,
Yeah. Well, I was fascinated like to understand like um during a live event back then, how did you transfer a film? Like because you have to be quick. I was wondering about that.
yeah, you kind of shove the flash between your legs
Yeah.
and rummage around in your bag and just do your thing, while people were knocking to your side if you're in the crowd. Um, and I would often have to plan ahead and make sure that I got a spot in the front of the stage.
Mm.
So, while my friends are still back at the bar, I'm up there, 15, 20 minutes or more before the band started, just making sure that I had the location that I wanted.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
because often it you'd get stuck in one place if there wasn't the moat, set up for the
Yeah.
larger shows.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, is planning. The my last book I did in 2008 was on breakdancers,
Hmm.
contemporary breakdancing, and that I shot with medium format film,
Hmm.
which you get 12 shots per roll.
Hmm.
Uh, and that was interesting because the circles would get really tight sometimes, and everybody jostling to see the dancers in the middle of the cipher,
Hmm.
and they're reloading those on the paperback rolls was much more difficult.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, it just yeah, it is what it is. But digital certainly makes it easier to shoot a lot more
Well,
images.
that's my thing. I'm like, I like to shoot constantly, and I love these,
Mhm.
maybe smaller moments. So I'm like, I kind of
Yeah,
shoot continuously sometimes, at times, like, and I love the sequencing, because then
but
I capture some expression that I might have missed if I just took a singular shot, and
yeah,
I really love, you know, kind of look, these like intimate like expressions, or the veins on somebody's neck, or the spittle coming out, or something, detail like that. That's
hmm
and
I would say that I would say anywhere from 50 to 75% of what I shoot, I'm not actually looking through the viewfinder.
hmm, hmm,
Um, So, and that just comes from like sticking with one piece of gear,
yeah,
and getting to really, really know it. And just being loose, not feeling like you need to capture that like perfect image, because you don't I don't know, it's more, you know what I mean, it's kind of more of an artistic choice in that,
hmm,
like, I'm not so worried about getting the money shot per se. I'd rather see what comes out of it.
hmm.
um I mean, one long running series I've been doing is photographing my children who are now 7 and 11,
Oh yes,
and
yes,
with the Leica.
cool,
And I'm taking some of the same ways of working as I did with bands, not with the flash per se, but just with that, being really, really loose with it.
hmm.
Um, and I think that it just makes often for a more natural image, and those surprise moments.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
How about your travel stuff as well? How do you approach subjects, say, like in Hanoi in Vietnam, where like how do you approach subjects like that, or is it kind of observer and just snap like street photography?
Yeah,
street
it's
photography, I
more,
guess.
I guess. I'm not a big fan of the street photography moniker, or at least what it's become.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, which is a lot of just, photographing people walking along with a cell phone.
yeah.
Uh,
That's true.
but
Yeah,
yeah, again, I approach it loosely, and just try and, I'm a pretty quiet person generally, but a lot of that too, I shot with a Rolleiflex where you look down, which
yeah.
was helpful. And I think, yeah, if you're shooting and just pulling the camera away and just trusting yourself that you're gonna, get what you need to get, knowing your lens and focus and
Mm,
whatnot. And just, yeah, wandering, you walk a lot.
yeah.
The series I've been photographing landscapes
Oh,
a
cool.
lot,
Yeah.
and in particular, cloudscapes.
Mm,
Uh, and that also involves just being out there, because it's just constantly changing. It's just, so, and yeah, just taking a lot and seeing what sticks.
with that type of shooting, do you use like a tripod, or do you still use the Leica, or?
No, I'm using the Leica, and
Mm,
actually shooting a lot of it with a telephoto lens,
oh, cool.
135 millimeter.
Mm,
Uh, to get that sort of, because we've had a lot of dramatic clouds, and I was in Hawaii in February with a lot of dramatic clouds, and trying to compress those layers, and just finding that right moment when they make a particular shape or whatever. And the idea is to then print them large.
yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I've got some Hannah bamboo paper that I'm going to
Ooh,
print them large on.
that's a nice paper. Well, I
Yeah,
found I've been learning. I've been self printing myself, and I love that process of taking, say, the now digital image and printing it. It's a different craft within itself,
yeah.
fine art printing, and there's so many nuances I'm still picking up, and experimented with the type of paper that really matters, how image, the end result, how comes out, so it's fascinating, and I think it's an art form within itself, uh, um to
Well,
kind of.
I was a master, considered a master darkroom printer. I mean, some of my peers would come by to visit and watch me work, and they'd just be like scratching their heads. I mean, I had some images that would have upwards of like 20, 25 dodges and burns.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And especially working with a flash, and film, it's like, yeah, you'd have areas blown out and other areas. So, yeah, I really learned my craft in the dark room. And there's about 10 things I know how to do in Photoshop, but
Yeah,
those 10 things work for me,
yeah,
to,
yeah.
to do what I want. I mean, I still work with my archives a lot. So I have an Imacon scanner,
Hmm.
a good, fairly high end scanner, and it has made recovering some of those images that were just so like daunting in the dark room. It's
Hmm.
made it a lot easier to reproduce those now.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of, well, actually, I was gonna ask you, you kind of going back in the past a bit. So when you were shooting, at the with the, like, Sub Pop and at that scene, how were you getting the images out? Were you self-developing at the time, or were you sending, say, the rolls to the other film developers, and then?
Yeah, no, at first I was definitely souping all my own stuff and printing. I mean, originally I was at college at the University of Washington in the
Hmm,
art programs, studying photography. So I would do a lot of it there.
hmm,
Um, at one point, I got a job with a company called Auto Trader,
hmm.
and it was a newsprint weekly that cars and trucks for sale, and then we'd have agents that would go out and make little uh, to photograph cars and trucks for sale and boats and whatnot, and then we would make little half-tone prints, develop the film, make little half-tone prints,
Hmm.
for the newspaper. And we used to bulk load film, 100-foot rolls of film for the
Yeah.
agents. and I was in charge of ordering the film. So it was like, well, 500 feet for them, 100 feet for
Yeah.
Grunge.
Cool.
I think statute of limitations is well up now.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
uh, and then I would develop a lot of the stuff there, and then as time went, I had dark rooms and closets, one at the Sub Pot warehouse, and bathrooms and kitchens, and
Cool. Yeah.
you name it. Yeah.
It's like cool to me because now with the digital cameras, I just take the SD card out, put it in my laptop, and you have the image. And I just like that physicality, that that step of processing of that I think that takes more talent than with the digital
Yeah.
camera, because I feel like it's too easy. I've kind of recently purchased Fujifilm X-T3, and it's like they have all these film kind of profiles. I'm like, I don't need that. It's like
Yeah.
I don't want filters. It's like,
Well, that's what appeals to me about the Leica as well, is that it really is pretty bare bones.
cool.
You still manual focus, f-stop, and shutter speed, and that's about it. So yeah, you really need to know your stuff. It's a bit like shooting slide film,
Okay.
to a
Yeah.
degree. Like, you don't want to blow out the highlights, and you can always recover the shadows more. And so I kind of treat it as shooting slide film.
Hmm.
Um, but I also, though, the last time I shot film and I went in and got that big lab bill, and then I was like, oh god, and I still have to scan this stuff,
Yeah.
and there's really nothing here, and I just spent $300 on processing. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it is if you are shooting film these days, it's a labor of love, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's I've I'm part of a group called Center for Photography up in Woodstock, New York, and they have their
Hmm.
own developing room, film developing room, and digital lab and stuff too. So I've had a few shows to show my work at venues in the city where I've self printed, but that's how I learned the nuances of.
Do you know Doug Menuet at all?
Kind of rings a bell, but I can't.
He had a gallery in Woodstock a few years. He was a commercial shooter. He
Hmm,
had a gallery there, I think. I was up there photographing him for Adobe. This was probably, like, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago.
yeah.
Nice
Oh
photo.
yeah, I have to check them out because it kind
Hmm.
of rings a bell. But
Hmm.
I'm fairly new, unlike yourself, where I've read you picked up you kind of first camera around 12, early age.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I kind of started at 30, and I'm 35 now, so I'm
Uh-huh.
picking up. I went all sorts of routes of in tech, and I have a degree in criminal justice, and
Oh, okay.
kind of picked up and moved to New York in 2016, and found the camera, and I've been nonstop ever since. I love
Uh-huh.
the practice, and I particularly love studying past photographic work and the methodologies and techniques captured then, because I find it more artful comparatively to what I see in digital stuff, where a lot of it's photoshopped and um, super digital, which and overproduced, which I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm real thankful for having that grounding in
Mm.
traditional photography.
So I guess where it's spin off of that was initially at 12. I did you have a visual preference or visual uh, acumen or visual library that you pulled from, that that got you going? I know you mentioned maybe Gary Winogrand and Lee.
Hmm.
But was there anything else that pulled you to photography at that age?
Well, I think I was kind of an introverted kid, and I had an uncle who was into photography, like, 6, 7 years older than me, and he also at the time, I lived with because of divorce. I lived with my grandparents for a while, so he also turned me on to music as well. You know, I mean, he was buying Alice Cooper records when they were coming out,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you know, stylistically, I kind of started to figure that out when in my teenage years, and I was definitely influenced by like Bob Gruen and some of the other early English punk photographers. You know, just seeing those pictures of the band and the audience at the 99 Club and that's the Roxy, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, really was like, wow, that's what I want to do, you know.
Yeah.
It just seemed so exciting, and you know, and but at the same time, yeah, I was studying traditional fine art photographers like Winogrand and Friedlander, and so I really had a sense of how important composition is, and then in conjunction with you know, a moment and of lighting, of course. So you know, I just always had that there, and I think if you look at all of my photography, no matter how disparate the subject matter is, there is a line that runs through it. Um,
Well, I
you
love
know,
a shot I've noticed on the site. It was a field. It might have been Hanoi as well, where I loved, you have the subject in the left corner, and then just space, and you
mhm.
have the, you know, utilizing the negative space to make
Yeah, I
composition.
use
Yeah,
negative space a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful shot where it was just nicely framed, and I just love that, simplicity, but also the complexity of it as well, to try to line that up within the lens as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, after I went on tour with Pearl Jam in '96, I was working on a book of photos with another photographer for them, and Eddie and I were looking over photos, and I had this one where he's just really tiny down in the bottom part of the frame. It's kind of looking from behind, like three quarters,
Hmm.
and then it's just all black around. And he just stopped and he's looking, and he's like, wow, I never thought about it like that before, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's yeah, I think it's using space to tell a story, really, or you know, an emotion.
mm.
Uh, I do go through a lot of black ink
Yeah, yeah,
in printing.
yeah. um, are you majority of photos, well, in archives, are mostly black and white, or do you
I
have
would
a lot
say,
of color?
yeah, 75%
Mm.
or more. At least what's most usable. I've been scanning and digging up some more of the color ones recently.
Mm.
Uh, but you know, it was again a matter of economics too at the time. Really had no way to print color, or even, you know, a lot of the things where the photos were going couldn't print color.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and 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 so you know, it would shoot a few, maybe a roll or two if, at a session, or you know, every once in a while a live show just to see. But yeah, I also like, it was also with the flash technique and everything, it was just so much easier with black and white.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
think it gives it I feel like black and white, you get more detail as well with
yeah,
and it,
timeless quality to it for sure.
it fit perfectly with the performances you were covering too. I don't think like color would really exuberant to the energy of those performances at that time.
Hmm.
And I think the black and white was it fit perfectly within that context.
Yeah, it makes it more intimate, yeah, I think, and shaded. You know, a couple big influences are like Larry Fink,
Mm.
his work, and uh Barbara Morgan, like her dance photos from the 40s. So using all that negative space.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of combine those two and throw in some Winogrand and
So how long were you in capturing say the grunge scene, and then kind of took a break from like the music photography and focused elsewhere? When was that transition, I guess?
yeah, it was sort of towards the end of the 90s there. I just, yeah, especially, once Kurt died, and then I kind of got very pigeonholed.
Yeah.
Um, and it was kind of wearing on me, and I just felt like I needed to get away and do something else. I've also suffered from chronic pain my whole life.
Mm.
So like neck and shoulder issues and headaches and whatnot. So that, like, it was just wearing on me. The late nights, the lifestyle
Yeah.
was tough.
Oh yeah, yeah. I could imagine. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Also, man, sorry, I hit a blank.
That's okay.
No, I I was wondering, like, but do you? Oh, I was wondering about like being pigeonholed, or like being known for like a specific time frame of, or breadth of work comparatively to. Do you want to kind of like showcase your current work? And I'm sure you've had so many people want to talk about the past work in the grunge scene, but does it kind of get tiring, or at this?
Yeah, I eventually, after a few years of trying to reject it, I just had to come to grips with it and just realize, well, not very few people actually get to leave a legacy such as
Mm,
this. So, like, I really need to embrace it and just be good with it. Um, at the same time, yeah, it can be frustrating. I mean, when you get 2,000 likes on a Nirvana picture, and then you post something that you're really happy about working on new, and you get 25 likes. So
yeah, yeah.
but you just kind of have to just do the work and just keep going forward.
Mm,
uh and just realize it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, I made some iconic photos, and a lot of these bands that are still playing, they still have to go out and play their greatest hits from then.
yeah,
you know
that's true. Like,
uh
yeah, it's like
like,
the
I don't know what
Stones
a
or something.
Mudhoney gig would be without them playing Touch Me, I'm Sick.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
And Pearl Jam still, well, has been still touring, correct? Or
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, they were supposed to be on tour right now, and in
yeah.
fact,
With
I
the
was going to see and photograph them. Had a trip to Disneyland planned in a couple weeks,
oh, cool. Yeah, well,
and yeah, with the kids, and then I was going to sneak away for a night while they were down there at the
cool.
forum. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
not going to happen.
Well, are you still friends with like people in the scene that kind of made it out, or well,
Yeah, yeah, we're we don't like hang out like we used to, kind of thing, but certainly, uh, yeah. I photographed a couple of years back when Pearl Jam did their stadium shows. They did two here at the baseball stadium in Seattle, and then
mm,
across the country. And so I photographed them here and in Boston. And yeah, I didn't hang with the band,
mm,
before or after, but first thing, Eddie comes out on stage and he sees me and he says hello,
yeah,
kind of thing. So and they give me the access I need. And but yeah, people like Mark Arm from Mudhoney I see, and that, local. It's just different because like, I have, like I said, I have young kids, so
oh yeah,
you
yeah,
kind of get stuck into that
yeah,
scene as well.
yeah,
I started a lot later than a lot of them, and
yeah.
you know
Uh, so it's talking about now with the. I'm sure you have thousands upon thousands of images. You know, grunge and other breadths of work, cipher and beyond. Can you talk about the process of trying to curate your own work, and then
yeah.
actually trying to publish a monograph or getting ready for a show? right?
Yeah, well, I'm working towards another book, Grunge retrospective, and
Hmm.
for fall of 21,
Yeah.
and that is a big frustrating process. In particular, a lot of photo editors and art directors will tell you that I have a very high hit rate.
Hmm.
So I would look at a proof sheet of mine, and out of 36 images, there's a good 20, 25 that like are usable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe a dozen of those that are like holy cow. So um, it's a difficult process to parse that down, and I do all the legwork of scanning and whatnot, but also just to figure out what direction it should go, and what's meaningful, and how do you also repurpose this thing that has been seen so many times,
Mm. Yeah.
um and what is relevant, so working with a person that I don't want to put anything out there right now, but working
Yeah.
with a person that's the publisher of this local company that
Mm.
I'm going to work with. I kind of decided to try and keep everything local.
Yeah.
She set up parameters, which is like, well, you've got your art images, you've got your kind of images that tell the story, that aren't necessarily like, oh, like my sort of grunge high art of blurry this and that. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you've got the pictures that maybe are just like fans would love.
Mm.
So we're kind of working with those three categories and figuring out how we merge those.
Mm.
And I mean, it's going to be primarily art, but you want those other things to tell the story.
Mm.
uh and I think people want a little more of that backstory as well.
Have you shown at I'm not any galleries or your other work in, or have you gone through that gallery system as well, or had like major kind of?
I have never had a lot of luck with the gallery system. I'm hoping maybe with some of my newer work eventually, once I get it to sort of approach it in that sense. I've done pretty well just selling prints on my own.
Yeah.
I could get more money for them through the gallery system, but then they also want their cut.
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's a hard thing. I mean, I don't think rock and roll photography has really been taken seriously until more recently.
Mm.
Um, as an art form that's sort of divorced from just the celebrity in the image.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm kind of would like to think I help sort of maybe help break through that in a way. I probably one of the greatest moments of my recent life was sitting on a panel with Jim Marshall, like
Oh, cool.
about a
Yeah.
month before he passed away,
Mm.
and and some other famous photographers. But yeah, no, that was like, he's like, I mean, that man
Yeah. He's
is
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Um, yeah. So it's yeah. It's kind of curious of the whole like overview of like the transition of being like known, being there in a specific scene and a movement, where I don't think I think you've touched base at the beginning of the conversation where um, I don't think we'll see any type of movements anymore like that. And I get that feeling, it's like
Mhm.
everybody's kind of, well, now we're all isolated, but you can easily produce something via, digital tools on a laptop. And um, I've noticed in like the New York venues at the shows I've shot, it's like even the crowd kind of stands back from the performers. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? And like, you got to go up there and
Well,
like
that
you,
was even at the time, like going to LA or New York or whatever, the audiences were not the same as Seattle. There was just something about the Seattle audiences that
yeah.
were just off the hook.
Yeah, no, it was like just looking at your images from that time, and was like, whoa! Like I could imagine like that crazy stage diving and that
And I think it really, you know, that it was my pictures that kids elsewhere picked up on, and so when the bands would go tour, like they were like, oh my god, we have to do that too, you know.
cool. Yeah.
You go to London, and they were just all the kids were going nuts there, and
Nice.
so yeah, it was.
To go back to that time, I guess not to specifically inquire about just grunge, but culturally in Seattle, what was going on that like drew drove that movement? But were there any other artistic movements going on in Seattle at the time? Like, say maybe was there hip hop going on, or literature, or writing, visual arts, or
Yeah, there was definitely a good visual art scene happening here. You know, painters and cartoonists, things. You know, Larry Reed, a local art curator, he ran a Center of Contemporary Arts, COCA, and he was bringing in things like survival research laboratories and great outsider art from all over. So yeah, I think it was a very culturally rich place. Beyond that, I mean, you know, we're kind of especially at the time, we were more isolated here in the Northwest, and
yeah.
so we were like just hungry for it,
Mm.
and I think that really, you know, propelled things forward, is just that need, because it was kind of a working class ghost town before that.
Mm.
You know, there was Boeing, but there was no tech companies. You know, Microsoft didn't really get its start until the you know, early 90s,
Mm.
the company it is now.
Mm.
uh, so yeah, it was very working class, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's a I guess. Well, I guess why I've kind of played around with this question. I guess with it within myself, but I guess I pose this: why are we as a culture so obsessed with like icon or like the celebrity? You know, in general, like we're fascinated with like cultural, you know, icons, say like Kurt, and but then you know we kind of stray away from other aspects of society. So I'm just maybe just a broad question, but why do you think so? I guess, but
um yeah, it's a good question. I think we you know, I think there's just something about that fame that we maybe because, so, you know, we yeah, yeah, it's a good that's a hard one.
well, it's
But
like
yeah, I mean,
but
it's something that we can oh boy, blah.
well, it's more of a philosophical question, I guess. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, you yourself don't have to solve, you know, answer the question. I think a lot of you know psychological, you know, or sociological professors or students kind of ask why are we infatuated with media, and the icon,
Well,
you
I
know,
think it's kind of fills up our own empty lives, I guess.
yeah,
You know,
true.
sad, but
That is true.
I
Yeah,
mean, I just find it fascinating just how still ongoing the interest is in the grunge scene, you know.
yeah,
And I guess part of that, a lot of that has to do with the famous people that came out of it. That, you know, I mean, they never knew they were going to become famous, per se. I guess
yeah,
nobody really knows that they're going to become famous, but
yeah,
um yeah, it's just because our lives are really for the most part filled up with mundane activities, that maybe we just need that sort of glamour of
yeah,
sort. You know, it's really one of the few explanations I can go to as far as why Trump was elected
Yeah.
as president. You know, I mean, there is something there that, yeah, that people just had to like. It's sort of like how the in the '80s there was a show called Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous.
Yes. Yeah. I know it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we used to watch that as a joke, but I think a lot of people didn't, you
Yeah.
know. And
Feel like, yeah, no, I guess that similar where it's like, yeah, we are infatuation with, you know, these kind of demigods, or we build them up into our as cultural icons, but in reality they're just human. But
yeah,
in the general populace doesn't understand this, right? They perceive Trump, for example, as successful. But if you look at fact in his business history, business records, everything's been a failure, and he's been corrupt and a crook. So it's like,
hmm
you know, fact doesn't really matter though if
yeah, yeah.
public
No,
perception is that grand.
yeah. And I think Kurt Cobain has certainly been mythologized to a large degree, you know.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and for better or worse, I don't know.
Mm,
But yeah, he was just. I mean, I remember the first few times I met Kurt, like when he would come by the loft, and maybe there'd be some people partying. I had a loft next door to Sub Pop downtown, and
cool.
he would just sit on the sofa. I mean, he was a wallflower. I mean,
Mm,
the Nirvana came to the scene somewhat late compared
mm,
to Soundgarden, Mudhoney, etc. Uh, and yeah, I mean, one friend of mine, after he committed suicide, a friend of mine was like, God, I'm surprised he didn't do it a long time ago, because he had that, sort of depressive quality about him.
yeah.
And so I think that gets overlooked. I mean, at the same time, he was also a warm, funny person. So it was complex. I think, everyone's has a very complex makeup.
Yeah.
I remember one time, and I met somebody down in LA, and on some project for talking about something, and when she met me, she's like, "Oh my God, you're so different than I expected. I thought you'd be this sort of like, you know, overweight guy with the like below the knee cargo shorts and long hair, and and I'm like, no, that's not, yeah."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mm,
we all make up stories about how
yeah.
other people should be, and I think it's probably, maybe it's easier when somebody's famous to sort of divorce ourselves from that reality of who they really are.
Yeah. Well, I could imagine too, like being say, Kurt was an introvert, and then that sudden rush of fame, it would have just been hard on him too.
Oh
I could
yeah, and then
imagine.
having a child at that
Yeah.
age,
Yeah.
and I mean,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, it was, not to mention a humongous heroin
yeah.
addiction. I mean,
Oh,
all the combination of it just been incredibly overwhelming. I mean, it
yeah.
would be for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, same. I think about it too. Like, I was checking out actually, I think an old documentary last night, just to kind of get the vibe of, your breath of work. Hype. Yeah, I was checking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like
No, that's great.
2 years before or after, Kurt, but it was a cool doc. And I don't know what was going on. Sorry, but I was just like, it was a really interesting film.
Yeah. No, it's a Doug Price. Yeah, we went on to become good friends. The
Cool.
director.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was. Well, I like those documentaries right when they like around the time. I know there was like, I've noticed there was a Kurt documentary in 2015 by Universal and HBO. I'm like kind of straying away from
Yeah.
that. I don't know if I should check it out, but um, besides, I don't know. I guess
Hey,
besides,
have you seen the one about a son
oh, I think, oh, maybe that's what
by
it was.
AJ Knack?
No, no, I haven't yet.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah, I worked on that as well, and it's there's no actual Nirvana music in it because they couldn't get the rights, but it's really just uh, footage that they filmed around the Pacific Northwest here.
Hmm.
Really beautiful footage combined with interviews, the voiceover of Kurt.
Hmm.
Um, he did interviews with Michael Azerrad, for his book back in the '90s, uh, and so yeah, it's really touching movie.
Hmm. Now, so are you still interested in like the cultural fabric of the Seattle area within your photographic work, I guess? I know you did the monograph cipher, and was that in Seattle based too? The
Primarily, yeah. I mean, we had actually Seattle had a world class breakdancing scene.
Oh, cool.
And we still, I'm not as in touch with it anymore, but the Massive Monkeys crew, who they won the $500,000 purse in South Korea and things like that.
Cool.
They actually come to my son's school and teach breakdancing for after school programs and things like that. So they have a space down in Chinatown. They teach. So yeah, I'm not there. There are some things that I'm interested in, and I'd like to pursue. Is just finding that time.
Oh yeah.
It's not. It has like I'd love to go out and photograph stock car racing.
Oh,
Just
cool.
weird stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
musically, there's not a whole lot that really compels me. I've been working a little bit with a local hip hop label called Cabin Games, doing some things. Yeah, and I don't know.
Could you just speak briefly on the difference between, say, straight up documentarian photography comparatively to a more artistic practice? I know, I think I've read somewhere as well. You consider yourself more of an artist, and the mindset capturing those instances. So, what would be like the difference comparatively to just a mindset of a documentarian comparatively to a fine artist, I guess, using the same medium of the camera.
Yeah, I think that a journalist, I think, feels like they have to um, play it straight more,
Hmm.
and I think that like for example, when I think back on like the early days of photographing the bands, they were kind of experimenting as much as, and then at the same time I was experimenting.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel this pressure to like, oh my God, I need to get just the perfect shot of the lead singer so that, the beauty shot kind of thing. So I was able to just like, hey, I'm just going to hold my camera in front of me and put some blurry lights in front of them and see what happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
and really kind of develop more in a visual style versus like this need to really concretely document the time and place in a certain way that translates easily to the public at large.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean that's there's a lot of gray area there. Of course, there's a
Hmm.
lot of fine line.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I've always sort of like one of my big influences I would say would be a lot of the Magnum photographers, the Magnum agency,
Yes. Yeah.
and in particular some of their newer photographers. They were traditionally more kind of old school journalism, like, but they've really loosened up as far as their membership goes. For example, Trent Park out of Australia.
Hmm.
um uh, yeah, he's amazing, absolutely amazing. um TRENTPARKE.
Cool.
And
I have to check his stuff out. Yeah.
his black and white book 5 Minutes to Midnight is incredible. So it's the work is a lot looser. It's sort of like you tell a different story than if you were just shooting it straight. It's like,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? It's sort of more, it becomes more of the mind, or more of the heart than necessarily the mind. So, or it's, yeah, I don't quite try to describe it, but
Yeah, I get it. I think it a more expressionistic, yeah,
expressionistic, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, than trying
Yeah.
to discover a truth behind a certain story or something. Or
Yeah, and especially in recent photography with the advent of these high-end sensors and whatnot, people have become very obsessed about sharpness and low light. Oh, I can photograph under any light and get it sharp. And it's
yeah,
sort of we've lost that sense of emotion and a lot of photographs, I think,
yeah,
and expressionism. I mean, if you look at some of the masters, their photographs aren't always sharp, or they just, yeah, they just are. They're like,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Well, I love the film like output where the grains, the tiny grains you can see, and I
mhm,
love like imperfections in a shot too. Whereas like with digital, it's like all these algorithms at work, facial recognition, like 100,000 points, to get the
yeah,
clear. I'm like, I don't want that. It's I do love deep shadows, and I'm particularly remembering just a few shots you did of Kurt in the hotel room, which I thought were
mhm,
absolutely beautiful because it's just organic, organic
yeah.
Kurt, and the shadowing on those images is beautiful. So that's what,
Yeah, and it's a lot, I don't use autofocus very often for that
yeah,
reason, because I want to place the focus where I'm going to place. I mean, sort of like on Instagram, I recently um posted a photograph of Mark Lanigan
yeah,
that I took, where you see a profile of him, but he's out of focus, and what's in focus is a sign behind him that has some Cambodian writing and an arrow on it,
mm,
sort of pointing in the direction that he's looking.
yeah,
So yeah, you would be like, well, wait a minute, the star isn't in focus, but yet the photograph has a lot more depth and meaning to, I think, an emotion to it, than if it just had been a perfect profile of him.
yeah. I guess that's where you can also say, with a as a artistic photographer, you have a lot more room to incorporate, metaphor,
Yeah,
yeah, within the
yeah,
the visual
with
language.
the choices that you make. Yeah,
Mm,
certainly.
yeah.
Um, or the
Well,
choices you don't make, or I like to capitalize on accidents as well.
yeah.
I quite a few of the images that are very, very interesting from my live days, the classic grunge period, are weird multiple exposures, because I was leaving my shutter open, and if there was other photographers that their flash went off,
Yeah.
sometimes I'd notice that a lot of there were like other sort of more amateur photographers that would sort of follow my lead. So
Yeah.
if they saw my flash go off, they'd be like, "Oh my god, I got to take that picture,"
Yeah.
and so it would give me a mirror ghost image of.
Which,
And it was totally like I wouldn't know it until days or a week later, once I processed the film. So it
yeah.
wasn't like there was never this instant feedback either.
Yeah.
You know, it was, so you just kind of have to build on what you were doing, and I think that's important too.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, now with the, in the age now of COVID, where do you think the field is going to go, or are things drastically changed within photography and fine arts as
Oh
well?
God, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
All
yeah.
it's
Once again,
already
that's a
it already changed.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I'm so fortunate to have the the body of work that I have. I'm not quite sure how I would be making a living otherwise
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
you know, I feel bad, especially for, gig photographers right now and wedding photographers, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just, yeah, it's just sort of ground to a halt for who knows how long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's and there is, yeah, I mean, I've I've had people like, oh well, I mean, I had one big client for a while, and when I was back doing some advertising work, and then one day they called and were like, oh hey, can you recommend some, good little inexpensive digital cameras?
Mm.
And this was just like I was been photographing shoes and stuff for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we're just gonna start doing a lot of this stuff ourselves,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, knock yourself out,
Yeah.
Good run,
That's
but
true. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
everybody thinks they can do it themselves, and then you realize you do need a professional to solve these visual problems for,
yeah,
say, a client. So I think
uh-huh,
it does take a trained eye, but also a trained mind and the years of
yeah,
experience to go in and solve those business, say, in a business standpoint of those problems. Or you
yeah,
you have an intern in marketing or something, take a cell phone shot that,
yeah.
so
But I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people, I think it's just as a society, our sort of visual education has gone down because of the prevalence of, it comes down to, yeah, the the dichotomy between representation and it being something that's subjectively, artistic. It's sort of like, and so many people are just okay with just, I just want to represent this,
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't want to think about like, how does that feed on your emotions or whatever. So there's a big, I think there's a big gestalt element to photography, and that's sort of what I've always tried to keep in mind and play out. Like just like, what if you look at this picture, what does it make you? Does it make you like tingle inside? Does it your gut do something? Your heart, your mind? What's going on here?
yeah.
So yeah,
It's really to evoke emotion. That's the art of it. It's to evoke.
yeah.
Um,
And the big piece of advice that I give to photographers is that you have to think fast and you have to think slow at the same time.
mm,
So, you have to be quick in order to capture the moment or whatever. But at the same time, you have to slow it down so that you're getting it, you're taking in the big picture. I mean, it's sort of like if I had gone to gigs and never looked behind me. But the
yeah,
most interesting thing often was behind. It wasn't the singer on stage. It was behind me. It was the kids going crazy or whatever.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So yeah, you have to just take in all the elements and work with it.
Cool.
Yeah. The
Well,
other thing I say is bend your knees,
mm,
which means, in other words, find that new angle.
yeah, just like
Yeah.
look at things differently.
Look look at
Different
things
perspective.
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, I guess I don't want to keep you anymore. We can. I would just want to kind of wrap with well, you have maybe a new possible monograph coming out, planned out for 2021. Do you see
Yeah,
anything?
we 2020, fall of
Yeah, we're just
2020 would have
trash
been a
it.
terrible
Yeah,
time to release a book.
yeah, yeah.
I think we're
And
all going
then,
to be a little distracted then,
yeah.
even before the coronavirus ththing.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, we have Corona, and then we have, then the general election, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
geez, yeah. And then, do you ever envision having like a major retrospective, museum wise, or anything like that, or?
That's another thing that, yeah, I don't rather not talk about it, but yeah,
Okay,
that hopefully will happen as well. And I have
cool.
some crazy ideas for that. Like
Yeah,
I'd love to like reproduce a dark room and just
yeah,
make it a little more of a physical element than just rectangular frames on a wall. I'd like to, you know, play with that. But
Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
certainly.
I'll be on the lookout for the new work, but I'll also, I have, your first, I believe, first monograph,
Hmm.
and so I have to pick up the others as well.
Yeah, Touch Me, I'm Sick is much nicer. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, thank you so much for the time and the conversation. And
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was good.
cool. Be well and be safe out there. And I look forward to more prints and work and stuff. So
All right. Yeah, you too. Yeah, stay safe, stay inside.
I'll try, but I
Well, you
need a
got to get
wander.
out for some
Yeah.
exercise for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I need a wander, So
Oh,
uh,
I know. Yeah. Well,
cool.
that's what's, yeah, that's why it's actually been a good time to work on my cloudscape
Yeah.
project,
That's true. Nobody's there. So you got
Nobody's
the
there. Yeah. Yeah.
nobody's in the, field of view and view, horizon. So it's like,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there's no going and photographing anything, much of anything else really right now. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, hopefully things will change. And but anyways,
it will.
thank you once again
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Yeah. Take care, Robert.
Take care, Charles. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.